all about writing with Ben and Sara.
Welcome to All About Writing, the podcast that covers everything about the world of writing from the inside out. This is episode 4, part 1 of our series on the business of writing. I'm Ben, here with my co-host Sara, who is an award-winning, best-selling author, screenwriter, editor, and TED Talk presenter.
And I'm Sara, here with Ben, who is an award-winning, best-selling author, ghostwriter, editor, and publisher. Today, I think we're going to be doing part 1 of many parts of the business of writing, if I understand our strategy, Ben, correct?
Absolutely. There's a lot to talk about here, but we're going to start big and start working down from there.
Right. And I think the best way to get started is just to talk about that huge landscape that is publishing, both the traditional versus self-publishing, which we both come from many different directions into publishing. Both of us have touched kind of all of that, both from the self-publishing, from small press, from traditional big 5 publishing houses, and being a publisher yourself. So I'm really excited to dive into this one because I know we're going to bring a lot of dimension to this that most people don't get to play with. Not a lot of people get to be on many, many sides like this. They usually have one trajectory or another. So I kind of thought you might want to start us off with telling everybody, a lot more in depth about your path to being a writer on all the different avenues you've taken to get a book out into the world.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is a big topic, and it's a question that a lot of authors, when they're just starting out, they wonder about, should I self-publish? Should I traditionally publish? And the good news is there are lots of pros and cons to both. Neither is a bad path. You just have to go in with your eyes open, and that's the key. When I first got into the industry, so 15 years ago, it was very clear. Traditional publishing was the real publishing. And self-publishing was the sort of still vanity press. Oh, couldn't make it in the big leagues, so you're going to do it this way. It was changing even back then. That was definitely the perception, and very much still, in many ways, the reality. And a lot has changed in those 15 years. Self-publishing has come a long way. It is far less the Wild West that it used to be. It's got a lot more credibility. But this naturally happens as an organization, as a community grow and learn, standards start to creep in. It's revolutionized, basically, to the point now where a lot of authors who were traditionally published have chosen to self-publish, not because they can't get a deal anymore, but because it's actually better for them to do it that way. So today we just want to sort of break it down a little bit into traditional versus self-publishing. And like Sara, like you said, I'm a pretty good one to do this because I have worked in both industries in many different roles. So I'll lay it out for you here. Let's see. I started out as an author. I mean, I am an author first and foremost. How I define myself in this industry, I am an author. And that's where I started. And I started by submitting my short stories to magazines, submitting my novels to agents, and I sort of was going the traditional path. And I was getting rejection letters, but that's okay. That's not a reflection of anyone's craft. It's just it happens. And I was learning and getting better and taking courses and getting advice. And then finally, one of my mentors, who was a traditionally published author, she said to me, well, why don't you try self-publishing? Like, you've got, I think, the energy to do it, and you could actually do really well with it. So I thought, okay, I see what you're doing. It's kind of like a business model. You invest money in up front, and hopefully you make money back at the end, like any other entrepreneur would do. So the very first book was self-published, and I hustled and hustled and hustled and got it out there, and pushed it online and got it into bookstores and did all the things that one does as a self-published author, and it did pretty well. It sold about 2,000 copies, which,
Wow.
just to put it into perspective, The average self-published book will sell between 75 and 150 copies in its lifetime. So I was able to move 2,000. So it was doing well. And I had written the second book and I was getting ready to self-publish the second book too, thinking, okay, I got this thing going. But then I had a fateful meeting with another author who I won't name drop, but I'll tell you, he's very famous. He also works in sci-fi and fantasy. He is one of the top-selling sci-fi fantasy authors in the world. He happened to live in the same city as me, and he happened to pick up my book in the local bookstore, liked it, reached out to me and said, hey, I like your stuff. Do you want to meet for a coffee? We met. We had a nice time. He asked me who my agent was. And I said, well, I don't have one. I'm actually self-published. And he said, well, do you want to talk to my agent? And I was kind of like, well, whatever. He's got time. And so I said, absolutely, I will. So I talked to this big New York agent who was impressed with the book and realized I had 2 more coming. Anyway, I signed on for traditional publishing. So the first book was republished through a big press, and then the 2 more that came with it was signed as a trilogy. They were traditionally published, and so my traditional authoring career was on its way, and I have a whole bunch of books now traditionally published. But I never lost sight of what self-publishing was, and that there were other ways forward that I thought maybe would give authors a bit more of a chance to get their work out there. And so I continued alongside my own author career, I continued to try and help authors find the various paths forward. And I'd learned a lot about self-publishing. So I started giving, talks on advice on what to look for. And eventually decided, okay, I actually want to make a change to this whole crazy industry. So I'm going to set up my own company, my own publishing company, to help authors out. And that's where Promontory came from. And Promontory was a traditional publishing house in that we signed on authors traditionally. But I thought, no, I want to break the paradigm here. So Promontory actually had 2 publishing paths. We had some traditional authors and we had some hybrid authors, where the author and the publisher would together put in their money and would share the revenue a bit more evenly. I tried that out for a few years. And so some people will say that was self-publishing. I think it's different, but whatever, let's call it self-publishing. Promontory basically had 2 arms of traditional and self-publishing. And eventually I had to let the self-publishing side go, because in this industry, you are either 100% traditional or you are nothing. And so the fact that Promontory had 2 arms, we had a very, very hard time getting respect as a publisher, because people would see, oh, some of your authors pay. Oh, well, how do we know all of them don't pay? Oh, well, oh. And so the shall I say, snobbery of the industry shone through very brightly. And so eventually I had to make the decision, well, which way am I going? Am I going to continue just do self-publishing and help authors that way, or we're going to go traditional? So I thought, well, let's do both. So Promontory dropped the hybrid publishing and just focused on traditional publishing. So again, continued on as traditional publisher. And then I started another company called Cascadia, which was just full on author services, not even a publisher, just shamelessly, nope, we're here to help you get your book ready for self-publishing if you want to go. So basically I had 2 separate companies. So for a long time, I actually ran a traditional publishing house and worked on the self-publishing side with a different company. All the time I was still, as an author, being published through New York. I worked with a couple of different publishers in New York. And now here we are. And all of a sudden I'm like, I might self-publish the next one, because there's so many good reasons why I want to do it. So I have been in both sides of this industry, traditional and self, as a professional and also as an author. So I've been on the industry side and the author side for both. So yes, I have a lot of experience in both. And if you're listening to the podcast, you can't see me drinking heavily right now, but this is going to be a bit of a therapy session too, because it's a tough industry. It's a tough industry for the publishers. It's a tough industry for the authors. So I'm just going to stop now. And Sarah, you tell us a little about your
As you
journey.
drink your wine.
Mhm. Mhm. We go. Okay, I'm good.
There was something you said about how you got really your track going after you met the one author who must not be named, at least not now, and who kind of made introductions for you. And it made me think about how much of this industry is serendipitous, how much is luck? I mean, we met by chance at a writers' conference and barely kept in touch over those years until we reconnected, as author publisher. And it, um, I had a similar experience in terms of finding my traditional route, but like you, I initially started out self-published. And it was one of those things I had spent most of my time sending query letters all through college, actually, and always getting rejection letters. And being a Wisconsinite here, there are certain bars, if you show up with rejection letters, they actually are currency. You get a free drink. So college, I had a bag of rejection letters. It was golden. I could cheap college student drink. Um, anyway, but I also, did not want to go the vanity press route, right? Where you're investing thousands of dollars on books that you may or may not ever sell, and you have to almost pay to play in a very heavy-handed way.
Yeah.
So that was never an option for me, but I do remember when self-publishing became more accessible, Amazon is the elephant in the room, right? And I still remember when Amazon first started kind of showing up in search results, my husband and I thought it was like a scam site because early on it looked odd and no one didn't understood what it was. Then when the book publishing side, kind of that, print on demand became a thing that was very new, and initially, I started publishing some of my books because I thought it'd be nice to get them off my desktop. And my husband
Mhm.
said, "These are good. You should just publish them. Even if only a couple of people can read them, it's better than them sitting on your desktop." And they started to get traction and they started to win awards and they started to get noticed, and there were companies that were interested in representing me or in being small independent presses trying to publish my books and push them further than I could. And so there's kissing a lot of toads
Mm.
in any entertainment industry or arm of the entertainment industry, so I definitely had a lot of those experiences. But
Mhm.
like you, right after I had worked with a very small press that had republished my self-published book, like you.
Mhm. Mhm.
I happened to meet somebody on social media, which I always will kind of go, oh, social media, but it does have it's good. And I happened to meet somebody on the cookware side, and we got together. And as we were talking, I mentioned um, that I had a book that had just come out and the genre and everything. And she goes, "Oh, you need to talk to my aunt. She's like this big movie director and right in your genre." And she set up a coffee for the next day in LA.
Wow.
And so I did. I met with this director who is still a friend and we've worked together and stuff, and she's lovely. And she goes, "Well, I go to the gym with this agent who like is kind of a thing. If you ever want to drop a line, you can use my name." And I thought about it, and I don't even remember what was the catalyst for me reaching out to my now agent, but I cold emailed her and just kind of name dropped, the ripple effect of this, right? And ended up signing with her. And she's the one who got me my big traditional publishing deal out in New York. And
Yeah.
so again, like you, my traditional deal in a way was absolutely the most untraditional way of getting there. It's truly landed on just happenstance and lucky meetings and right place, right time, book in front of the right person at the right time. It's so crazy. And I think that's something people, and you and I are going to talk about this too. So much is networking
Mm.
and so much is luck. And so, as hard as that is to hear, I think it's a truth that we don't talk about enough in this industry, that so much, it's why there's crappy movies made because
Yeah.
somebody's script happened to be in the right place at the right time when there was money, the directors, the actors were all available, and it got made. that's truly, it's just luck. So, so I have self-published. I have been on the traditional side and on the really tiny indie press side, and come at this from all of those directions. So I think it's going to be really fun. I really hope we hear from a lot of listeners who have questions about our routes, and maybe, questions about how they can further their own books. But um it's
And
really,
don't sell yourself short. You haven't mentioned your big New York publisher yet, right? Because you've talked about talked about small press. Sarah's also been published by HarperCollins. So just to put that out there on the record, everyone.
yeah.
Yes, one of the big five.
Yes, I know. I know. When I first got the deal, I called my parents and I was like, I told them about the book deal, and they go, "Oh, are they big?" I'm like, "Yes."
Kind of.
Kind
Yeah.
of the biggest. Um, but and I do want to say too, we both comment, I don't think we've talked much about our genres, because I do think certain genres lend themselves to self-publishing versus traditional publishing, or at
Mhm.
least have support. My deal with HarperCollins is with a nonfiction book, and
Right.
that's a very different animal when you're trying to self-publish a nonfiction book. Or, certain genres lend themselves to earning more if they're self-published. A lot of rom-com, or straight up romance, or cozy mysteries, some of those you actually can make more money. And I know quite a few authors who make a six-figure living publishing without a traditional publisher. And I know we're gonna talk about that, and I'm definitely looking forward to bringing on some guests who can speak to their experience and expertise with
Yeah.
those realms.
Yeah, one genre that I found as a publisher was really well suited to self-publishing. And I first discovered this as a traditional publisher. Books would come to me, and I'd have to say, "Yeah, this is fascinating, but it's not for us, so we're not going to take it. But let me have you considered self-publishing?" And that genre is the kind of book that a lot of business professionals use, kind of as a giant calling card. Like if you're a financial advisor or an investment advisor or a realtor or some kind of person who can move in very big circles, and you give presentations, you give talks, to have a book at the back of the room which you can sell after your talk, that is beautiful for self-publishing, because it's a kind of book which is probably not going to get picked up by a traditional publisher because it's a very niche subject about written by you, who are probably not world famous, but you may be an outstanding leader in your field and an outstanding speaker. And so you can give a great talk, and people are just loving what you have to say. To have a book at the back of the room, they're all going to buy it at the end. If you traditionally publish, it is very difficult to have those books at the back of the room, because you, as the author, only get so many. You can't just buy copies from your publisher. And you'd have to get a bookstore like your local Barnes and Noble to come down and set up a booth, and they're going to take their 40% and blah, blah, blah. You're going to wind up getting 10% of the sale. And if you want to change the cover, you want to update it, second edition, all those things. If you've sold the rights to a traditional publisher, that's all out of your control. But if you're the kind of person who wants to have a book that's there, like I said, as a giant calling card that can give people something to take away from a great talk you've just given, self-publishing is the way to go. You will definitely make your money back because you'll sell them at your talks. You keep all the revenue. You don't have to worry about having a bookstore there to help you. So there's an example of where self-publishing is absolutely the better way to go, which is that kind of sort of business-led book.
I never actually thought about that aspect when, you're using a book for something other than you just need to get it off your chest and put it out into the world. When you're using it as a strategic piece of your toolbox as a professional,
Mhm.
that's something that I don't think a lot of people think about. And I do think there's this, you know, still to this day, this expectation that traditional publishing really means you've made it, but the numbers don't always work in your favor. And so it comes down to, are you trying to make a living being a writer, or
Mhm.
do you want the support or the prestige of a traditional publisher, even though it's less likely? The beautiful thing is there's ongoing dialogue online in many forums that are really pushing for the reality that for a smaller press or for an indie press or for a self-published author, it's actually becoming a more lucrative thing. And you still have a lot of that control and the ability to do all of the things that you just said. So I'm really looking forward to exploring each of these, the traditional publishing and the self-publishing and all that it entails, because that's the other part of this, right? That we are not going to talk about too much on this one, but even when you're traditionally published versus, smaller press or self-published, you still are on the hook to market. That's
Mhm.
not done. If you're one of the best authors in the world, or not best, but one of the more famous authors, right? You're still going to book signings. You're still promoting your book. You're still putting in blood, sweat, and tears on the back end to promote your book. That's not gone. And so you're doing the same thing, whether you're, traditionally published or self-published.
Yeah, that's a great point, which I really want to just sort of sit with for a minute and make sure everybody understands who's listening. It doesn't matter if you're traditionally published or self-published, you still have to do the marketing yourself. Um, so I know a lot of authors, they'll tell me, look, I don't want to worry about all that stuff. I just want to write. That's great. Me too. But unfortunately, um, even if you're with the biggest publisher in the world, they're still going to expect you to do your own marketing. You got to get that website. You got to get that subscription list. The email list. You got to get fans. You got to do all these things, and it's no change. I mean, I remember when I first signed with HarperCollins, I was really excited. Oh wow, big giant publisher! I can't wait to talk to their marketing people because I want to see what they have to do. And I also ran my own small press, so if nothing else, I just wanted to get some tips on how do the big guys do the marketing. And I had the meeting with the marketing people, and oh, they were very charming. Don't get me wrong; they could talk it up. Oh, they promised me the world. But I asked them, "What exactly are you going to do?" The answers were pretty light. And what I've discovered in the traditional industry is because books, big publishers put out books every month, right? When your book is coming out, you will have the marketing department's attention for about 6 weeks. The 6 weeks leading up to the launch of your book, that is when all of their marketing happens. As soon as the book is actually launched and available to buy, all marketing stops because they've moved on to next month's books, which, from a business point of view, doesn't make any sense. Why would you market a product up to the point where people can buy it? And then as soon as they can buy it, you stop marketing it. But that's the way the industry works. And if the book doesn't sell well, it used to have 90 days on a bookstore shelf, 90 days to prove itself. Nowadays, it's often more like 30 days. If it has not sold enough copies, it's gone. The bookstores don't stock it anymore. The publisher puts it on the backlist, and it is done. They will never look at it again. They will never talk about it again. It's done. So that's something to keep in mind with the marketing. Traditional publishing is very, very short term, and they will give you maybe some support, but that's it. Then they've moved on to the next book because you're just one of 1,000 they have to get out this year. So yes, you still have to be leading the marketing charge yourself, whether you're traditionally or self-published. So that's a great point, Sarah.
Yeah, and I don't think that that's changed in decades, and I don't foresee it changing anytime soon. So
Yeah, I mean, people didn't used to have to market. I mean, I have talked to authors who were in the business like 30 years before me, and they have said, like, yeah, this was never a thing when they used to write. They would just write the book, hand it off, because the 30 years ago, the only place you could buy books was in bookstores. And so the only marketing that had to be done was convincing the bookstore to put it on the shelf. And that was it. That's all that had to be done. Of course, all that has changed now with ebooks and with Amazon and online buying. The market is flooded with products, and the way to market has changed. So, if you're traditionally minded, you can shake your fist at self-publishing all you like, but the fact is, it's there, and online selling is there, and ebooks are there, and they're here to stay. So the whole landscape has changed because of it. And
Wait,
go ahead.
Oh, I was going to, which, is a good place for us to wrap it up, unless you have one more point, Ben.
Well, I will just make one more point, and that is, I feel like I may have been bashing traditional publishing a little bit here, just because I think a lot of people have misconceptions about it. They think that, oh, if I sign with a traditional publisher, I'm golden. I don't have to do anything except worry about writing. And that's not true. I'm not saying don't traditionally publish. There are lots of good reasons to do it. The biggest one is that they pay you. That's awesome. And you've got the prestige and you've got all the help and all the professionals to make your book come alive. That's all good. It's just traditional publishing and self-publishing both have pros and cons. And I think that's really important to understand. And absolutely, we will need to delve deeper into the different elements of why on another show. But for Sara and I both, and forgive me if I'm speaking for you here, we've both done both sides, right? We've both been traditionally self-published. We both see the pros and cons to both. And we're both open to future books being either one or the other. It's not like either of us have said, oh, that's it, I'm done with that kind of publishing, I'm only this. Nope. We'll just see what the opportunities are and see what makes sense at the time.
Yeah. And I think, going in with both as open and not so much jaded about the process or one versus the other, but to be honest with yourself, with ourselves about what is entailed with both traditional and self is really the key to surviving the publishing landscape. That would be the best takeaway there. So
yeah, and the good news is it's an exciting time to be an author. There are lots of good options in front of you. That's really maybe take away nothing else from this show. Take away that is that you have limitless options in front of you. You just have to educate yourself on what they are. So, okay,
that's
well,
what we're here for today. Or
that's yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think that's it. That's our show. And thanks, everyone, for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of our chats. And please feel free to leave a review. It really does help us a lot. If you want to catch up with Sara, you can find her at saradahman.com and on Instagram.
And you can find Ben at bennettrcoles.com as well as Facebook and Instagram. So thank you again for joining us today. And please reach out through all the platforms that this is on. If there are any topics you'd like us to cover, or if there's any questions you have from this episode that you would like us to dive into, we would love to do so. So we'll see you again then, and when we'll next chat all about writing.
This has been All About Writing with Ben and Sara.